Okay, we'll begin. Are there questions?
Sir,
Yes, go ahead, please.
we could, in principle, look at higher orders in this perturbation. Like we are expanding tensor perturbation. So, if we had chosen, a different choice of, if we had made different choice of value for different nodes, would it matter?
Well, it will matter in the sense that ultimate prediction will probably change, right? In general, you're talking about the alpha vacuum, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the ultimate prediction for the scale invariant spectrum that we see, that could change. See, the problem is not that we are not including higher order in perturbation, because we know from observation that the perturbation at the level of at the time of CMB last scattering is small, right? It's like 1 in 10 to the 5. So the linear approximation is a good one, right? Up to at least last scattering. But the actual prediction could differ. If you don't use the Branch-Davies vacuum, but use general alpha vacuum for different fields, then the prediction could differ.
So this the scalar perturbation we have observed, right?
Yes, exactly.
So that does not depend on choice of vacuum.
I think that does. I mean, that I have not worked it out, but I'm sure that this has been studied. Right? And I think the scale invariant spectrum is consistent with Bunch-Davies vacuum. Okay. Whether it has been tested that the alpha vacuum doesn't work, I am not sure. Right? But this one can easily check. I'm sure somebody would have done it.
Okay.
That how things would differ if you have chosen a general alpha vacuum. But the smallness of perturbation you can assume, because we know from observation that the perturbation is small. Right? Now we see big perturbation, but that's because of the gravitational instability, right? Those small perturbations at the time of last scattering have grown into big perturbations, right? Because certainly when you think of our galaxy, for example, right, there is a large difference in densities in different regions. But that has happened because of the instability of the gravitational force. That slightly overdense regions start growing and become highly overdense with time.
So, there's some, initially when the theory was linear and we could quantize it, but when the perturbation is growing, there is, at some point there has to be a transition from quantum to classical transition.
Yeah, so the quantum to classical basically happens after the horizon exit. After that, you can more or less use classical physics to evolve it. Okay, even after the perturbation has entered the horizon, okay, by that time the quantum effects have become negligible. Okay, because the universe is big. So the quantum effects are basically important only at the time of inflation.
I'm talking about perturbation cluster formation.
Yeah, so those are all classical.
Yeah, those are all classical. So right from the start, we were assuming them to be classical.
No, after the horizon exit. Right? During de Sitter, of course, the quantum fluctuations produced these perturbations. But after the perturbation exits the horizon, right, we saw that the commutators fall off. Right? So the classical approximation should be a good one. And that basically continues till today. Right? After this, we'll essentially evolve according to classical physics. Right? But statistical mechanics will play a role. Right? We'll see. If you want to do things very carefully, you have to use this Boltzmann transport equation and so on. But still, it will be purely classical physics. The vacuum quantum fluctuations that are responsible for producing these in the first place, that essentially happened during inflation. Right? After that, we are not going to use quantum physics anymore.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other question?
Sir, when we choose a gauge like phi tilde equals to 0, sir, that means we are not considering the background fluctuation.
No, we are. It basically says that we can choose a time slice, right? So that phi tilde is set equal to 0 by hand, right? That we suppose we start with the background where phi tilde fluctuates. The phi tilde at different space points are different, okay, at a given time slice. But because phi tilde is rolling, we can always declare that at some space point where phi tilde is ahead, right, we'll define the time in such a way that phi tilde takes the same value.
Okay, sir.
Right?
Okay.
So this is just a gate choice. I mean, it's a question that you are choosing time appropriately so that phi tilde becomes uniform. Right? And this you can do because remember that we had introduced this notion of cosmic time, right? That of course required a spatial choice of time, and in that cosmic time, that advantage was that the universe was uniform. But now you are talking about the universe not being uniform, deviation from uniformity, right? So there is fluctuation. So because of the fluctuation, there is no well-defined notion of cosmic time. But you can make the time coordinate also fluctuate. It fluctuates a little bit because you are always doing linear perturbation. But by making the time coordinate fluctuate a little bit, you can make sure that the phi becomes uniform. But once you do that, then of course, physics doesn't change, right? This perturbation which was there in phi now goes into the metric.
Okay. Sir, sir, I just want to know, sir, what is the physical meaning of background fluctuation? Physically, I don't understand.
Yeah. So physical meaning basically says, in the classically at least, you can think of it that the in the background the phi just takes different value at different points, right? At this point phi has some value, at this point phi has a little different value. So in the homogeneous and isotropic universe, phi would have had the same value everywhere, right? That was the initial assumption, everything would have had the same value. But in fluctuating universe, phi will have slightly different values in different points.
Sir, background always be time dependent.
It's an evolving universe, right? So the background is time dependent. It doesn't have to be, but in a cosmology, right, the average background is the average value, right? And the average value we know is time dependent, right? Because our universe on the average is expanding.
So, sir, we can say there is a time dependency in background is responsible for a quantum gravity fluctuation, or not?
You can say it. Yeah, I mean, quantum gravity fluctuations are, of course, they are all the time. Okay? But because of the time dependence, right, in the de Sitter background, the quantum gravity fluctuations are enhanced, right? Because you saw this enhancement factor of h square over omega square compared to the usual quantum field in Minkowski space, right? This happens because of the time dependent background.
Okay.
But quantum gravity fluctuations are always there. Okay? They would be small. Okay, they will not be enough to produce the kind of physics that we see today.
Okay, sir. Okay.
So, and the fluctuation in the classical sense just means that the various fields, right, not just the scalar, various fields take slightly different values at different space point at a given time slice. Okay? And then the point is that at a given time slice is up to you. You have defined what you mean by given time slice to make things look better, right? Now, if the things are not looking so good anyway, right, if the phi is fluctuating, then you just change the definition of time here and here appropriately so that the phi actually takes the same value at a given time at various points.
Okay, sir.
Any other question?
Yeah, sir. I had something like when you wrote down some sort of a like effective potential for quantum gravity effects, when you added terms like phi 6 by m Planck to the 4 or something like that.
Yes. Okay.
Like the fact that the mass of the scalar itself does not enter in this like potential expansion of quantum gravity, is this a statement that, like, since this phi represents some sort of a particle, right, its excitations represent some sort of a point particle of mass m?
Yeah.
So like different point particles behave the same way in background gravity, in the sense they follow the geodesic under free motion.
Yeah. No, that's actually not true, in the sense that there are terms like this also, right? Phi to the 6 over m square terms should certainly be there, right? If m is a mass of a particle, right? When you try to integrate out these heavy particles, you will get things like this. But we are assuming that somehow they have adjusted your quantum field theory so that these terms are all included in saying that the potential is flat. But in general, such terms may also be there, where m is some mass of some other heavy particle, right? Not necessarily quantum gravity. These I focused on specifically because these are the ones which you don't understand, right? So without understanding quantum gravity, it's hard to say why these terms should be small, why these terms shouldn't be present. Right? But these terms are also there in general, right? If you try to do quantum corrections, for example, say in suppose you have just a 5-4 theory, right? But you can consider, say, phi coupled to, terms like this. Okay, so suppose this is phi. Okay, and this is some heavy particle that is going around in the loop. So this will typically generate terms like phi to the 6 over m chi square. Okay, if m chi is a particle propagating in the loop. But we are assuming that somehow you have understood this. Okay, why these are not present and why the potential is flat. But even if we assume that you have understood your quantum field theory well to rule out such terms, these terms are harder to rule out because this really requires knowledge of quantum gravity.
So if there are two scalars that have the same like small m mass of the scalar itself, but they couple to different fields, they'll behave differently in gravity.
Well, the leading coupling is the same, right? But certainly, the higher dimensional operators could depend on the nature of the particle.
Even if the particle mass itself is the same.
Yeah, if the interaction strength is different, for example, right? This will depend on the interaction strength of these couplings. So this is not even quantum gravity, right?
Yeah, this is just some other potential.
Yeah, this is some other potential, right? But even in quantum gravity, even if the particle mass is the same, right, there may be loops of a different kind. Suppose this is graviton, and then here there is some other particle propagating, right? Let me draw a 4-point coupling, right? 4-point correction. Let's imagine that you have couplings like this, for example, right? Will depend also, this is a coupling to gravity, but it could depend on this, how the coupling strength to the other particles are. What we know for sure, okay, and that follows from what is called the word identities, or it's a consequence of gauge invariance, is that the leading term is given by the minimal coupling formula, right? That you replaced all the derivatives by d mu. Okay, this is the leading contribution. But then the higher order terms, like we can write this in terms of some effective action, right? Imagine that you write something like r mu nu rho sigma, r mu nu rho sigma phi square. Right? Suppose you have a coupling like this in the effective action down by powers of masses. This coefficient could certainly depend on the nature of the particle. Okay, even if the particle happens to have the same mass. Okay, this will give a contribution effectively to 2 gravitons and so this is 2 phi and 2 gravitons. So let's draw a diagram with 2 phi and 2 gravitons. So say 2 gravitons like this. And here there are some loops of other particles. So couplings like these can be generated, and the coefficient can certainly depend on the nature of the particle, right? Because this is a general coordinate invariant by itself, right? There's nothing which tells us that this coefficient has to be related to anything else if you want to maintain general coordinate invariance.
Okay.
Is this okay?
Yeah.
Any other question? Okay, so let me then begin. Okay, so let me remind you where you were. So far what we did, we studied perturbation during inflation. So essentially we had quantum fluctuations. But we saw that you can be it can be treated as classical fluctuation after the horizon exit. So now we want to evolve them forward. So next step is to evolve them forward in time. Using Einstein's equation. And this is just classical, okay, because they're outside they have exited the horizon. And the idea is that the inflation or the inflation, okay, the role of the quantum analysis that we did is to provide the initial condition at the horizon exit. Okay, so whatever calculations we did earlier, okay, we are going to use them as providing the initial condition at the horizon exit, and then we'll try to evolve them according to classical physics. Okay, and we saw that it doesn't matter exactly where we put the initial condition, because the evolution automatically obeys classical evolution equation, okay, once the perturbation goes out of the horizon. Okay, so it's not that suddenly it becomes from quantum to classical. Even the quantum result, okay, reduces to classical result, classical evolution after the horizon exit. Okay. So it doesn't really matter exactly where you put the initial condition. So let me write down Einstein's equation. Okay, so R mu nu minus half R g mu nu equal to 8 pi g t mu nu. Now, when we evolve this, okay, for T mu nu, we shall use general form and not just the ones during inflation. And the reason, of course, is that we have seen that the energy density, okay, gets from the cosmological constant, nearly cosmological constant, or the potential, that gets converted to radiation, then to matter, okay? And you want to evolve it all the way to the last scattering surface. Okay? So it goes through radiation dominated phase, matter dominated phase, and so on. So you have to really include the full, the general T mu. And we'll decompose T mu just like we did for the metric. Okay? We decompose T mu nu into background and fluctuation. Okay. So here we are going to follow a particular convention. Okay, so we define, instead of working with T with both lower index or both upper index, we'll define this mixed index. It's just technically a little more, a little simpler. Okay, but you could work with any one that you like. Okay, so you define T mu nu as G mu rho T rho nu. Right? This is what is normally defined. So G mu rho T rho nu. And here, this is the full G mu nu and full T mu nu. Okay? No decomposition. The full G mu nu and T mu nu. After this, we are going to decompose this. We are going to write down these as a sum of the background plus fluctuation. So for example, T00, we're going to write as background T bar 00 plus T tilde 00. Then Ti0 as T bar I0 is 0. Okay, there no mixed component. Okay, this let me write down. So T bar 00 is actually minus rho bar. And the way you see it is because T bar with both component down, it was just rho bar, right? The average density. Okay. So once you raise one component, because G00 in the background is just -1, right? You get a minus sign. That's why it's minus rho bar. So Ti0, okay, I'll write as Qi. Okay, this is purely fluctuation because T bar I0 is 0. And Tij is T bar Ij. Okay, I'll write down what T bar Ij is. Plus, I'll write this as T tilde Ij. Okay, so but we'll write what these various objects are. So T bar Ij is P bar delta Ij. Okay, if you follow the definition of T mu nu, the pressure, okay, then Tij was Gij. Okay, P times Gij, P bar times Gij. When you raise it, that one index gets raised, and that just becomes delta Ij. Okay. And T tilde Ij, I'll write. Let's see if I have space here. I'll write this as Pi T tilde I delta Ij. Okay, at this stage, in fact, I don't, once I've defined this appropriately, I don't have to write upper and lower index. Now, from now on, upper and lower indexes are the same. So P tilde I, sorry, P tilde delta Ij plus sigma Ij, where sigma Ij is satisfies eta Ij sigma Ij equal to 0. Okay. This is because the trace part I have already taken out, right? That's the fluctuating the part proportional to delta Ij, I'm calling P tilde. So sigma Ij, I can impose this condition, right? Otherwise, I could have just put everything in sigma Ij. Is this clear? So this one I'll call rho tilde or minus rho tilde. Okay, I'm going to write down this neatly in the next page. Okay, but this is the way we decompose, right? The background plus fluctuation. Okay. And the only thing is that we have written it as T, the first index lower, second index upper. Now notice that I have not put T0i, right? And that's because that's not independent. And we'll see why it's not independent. So let me write again. Okay. So T00 is minus rho bar plus rho tilde Ti0, sorry, T0i. What did I do there? Okay, I think let me just check once more that I have the convention correct. I think this, yeah, I wrote this as T0i. So let me move this. T0i is I'm calling Qi. Okay, the other one will determine. So T0i is Qi and Tij is P bar plus P tilde delta Ij plus sigma Ij. Okay, where sigma Ij is traceless. So sigma ij delta ij equal to 0. Now notice that I have not written Ti0, okay, and the reason I'll explain now. So Ti0 is not independent. So the point is that Ti0 is not independent. Okay, so let's see how to determine it. So the way the analysis goes is that we have the relation that T mu nu is T nu. Energy momentum tensor is symmetric. Okay, you can make it symmetric by appropriate adding appropriate term that we know in general. So energy momentum tensor is symmetric. Okay. And after all, it's appearing in the right hand side of Bunsen's equation, right? If the left hand side is symmetric, it better be that the right hand side is symmetric. So let's see what it translates to in this language. So this means that we want to write in terms of T mu upper nu, right? So G mu sigma, T mu sigma plus G mu sigma is equal to G mu sigma, T mu sigma. Right? I have not really done very much except that I write in terms of these because these are easier to, these are the ones in terms of which you have defined these fluctuations. So now we are going to expand this to first order in perturbation. Expand this to first order okay, the 0, 0 component in fact will be trivial. So let's look at the 0i component. So let's set mu equal to I, mu equal to 0. Okay, because this should hold for all mu. So when you set mu equal to 0, so you see that this, okay, let me put it this way. So what you can do is that we can either pick the average here or the perturbation, but if you pick the average here, then you have to pick the perturbation there and vice versa. Okay? Because you are looking at the first order in perturbation, or you are going to compare. So I can write this as G bar 0 sigma, but G bar has only 0, 0 component. Okay, so once I have taken this to be 0, sigma has to be 0. And here I'll write T tilde, mu is I, so I0, plus, now I took fluctuating part from here. Okay, so for fluctuating part we'll write later, but T bar, mu is I. Now for T bar, if one index is I, the other one better be spatial index, Ij. Okay, because that's the P bar Ij component. So this is J. So if sigma is J, that means this is J. And nu is 0. So this is 0. And sigma is J. Okay, that's what you have here. And on this side, mu equal to I. Okay, so let's put G bar from here. So G bar Ik. Okay, because G bar has only, if this is I, then this has to be spatial index. G bar Ik, T tilde 0k plus, now G tilde and T bar. So nu is 0. Okay, so T bar, if once this index is 0, sigma has to be 0. Here mu is I, and sigma has been set equal to 0. So this is G tilde I 0. Is this clear? Now let me remind you G tilde I 0. So what we are doing here is that I am writing G as G bar plus G tilde and T as T bar plus T tilde, right? This also has G bar. Okay, let me, maybe I write this. G bar, this can be written as G bar nu sigma plus G tilde nu sigma times T bar mu sigma plus T tilde mu sigma is equal to the same thing with mu nu exchange, right? That's the equation, and we are expanding it out to first order in fluctuation. Okay, the leading term is automatically satisfied. Okay, there's a kind of confusion there. So first order in fluctuation, and that's this equation. Are there questions? Okay, so I'm going to write this equation again. Okay, in the next slides. Okay, so this is G, but okay, G0J is the same as G tilde. Okay, I don't have to, let me write it. Because 0J, that's a background 0J factor. Okay, 0J component of metric. So let me write this equation again. So G bar 0, 0, T tilde I 0 plus G tilde 0J T bar Ij is equal to G bar Ij G bar I might call this K, I think I have to write it K. Ik T tilde 0K. This also I had called K, so let me write it as K. T tilde 0K plus G tilde I 0 T bar 0, 0. Now, let me remind you the form of the perturbation that we had taken. Okay, so the only perturbation of the metric that we need is a G tilde 0K. So you remember the ds square we had taken to be something, and then the 0I component we had written as 2 lambda of t times bi dxi dt. Okay. So this means that G tilde 0K is basically lambda times bk. Okay, so that's what you're going to substitute here. Okay, G tilde 0, 0 is minus 1. So G bar 0, 0 is minus 1, right? Because the metric, there's a minus dt squared, that's the background. So minus, here you have T tilde I0. So T tilde I0 is what you had called, or that's what you want. Let me just check which one you want. Okay, so T tilde I0 is what you want. Okay, so let's write this as T tilde I0. Plus,
Sir,
yes, go ahead.
Sir, on what grounds have we said T bar 0 I equals 0?
Because of the isotropic. Because the background
Yeah.
is isotropic, right?
Yeah.
So from that it follows that this is the 0I component is 0. Okay, so this gives you minus T tilde I0 plus this is bk, lambda bk, and then T bar ik. So T bar ik was P bar delta ik equal to G bar ik was lambda square delta ik, and T tilde 0K. T tilde 0K is what we had called Q tilde K, I think, right? Just check. T tilde 0K is QK, okay, because T bar is 0. Plus This is again lambda bi. And t tilde 0, 0 was minus rho bar. So this tells us that t tilde I0 is equal to, this is bi p bar. Okay, so, and this you bring it on the other side. Sorry, this you bring it to the other side. So minus lambda, sorry, not minus, plus, because you take the t tilde I0 on that side and everything else on this side, right? So then you get plus lambda bi p bar plus rho bar minus lambda square q tilde I. Okay, so let me check if I have the, so t tilde 0 is minus lambda square q tilde I plus, yeah, I think this is, okay. So this is the relation. You can also reverse it. Somehow I have a feeling, I'm not completely sure which is, okay, we'll see when we go ahead which one have taken to be q tilde I. Okay, anyway, you can invert it also. Okay, t tilde, sorry, I think I made a mistake. This is what I had called q tilde I. Okay, so let me go back and correct it. Yeah, t tilde I0, unfortunately I had called qi. Okay, so let me do this right now here. So this is, should be I0. T bar I0, this also will be I0, but here it doesn't really matter. Both are 0. So this is I0. Okay. So here the claim would be that T0I is not independent. Okay. So up to this point, the analysis is the same. Okay. We just have to do the thing in the opposite direction. Okay. So here I'll have to write this. So T tilde I0 is what we had called, T tilde I0 is what we had called Qi. And this one I should have written as lambda square delta Ik T tilde 0k. Right now, so T tilde 0I. Okay, it just requires, so I bring everything on the left hand side again. So this should have been then lambda inverse, okay, because we are dividing by lambda square. Okay, so the lambda inverse bi p bar plus rho bar and minus lambda to the minus 2 qi. Okay, I'm writing this because this is what we may have to use. Okay, in various formula. Is this clear? Right? It's just a question of which one you take to be independent. Okay, I'm going to take T tilde I0 to be independent. Okay, that's why I wrote T tilde 0I in terms of T tilde I0, which is just Qi. I'll leave it as an exercise to check that the fact that Tij is equal to Tji, this implies that sigma ij is equal to sigma gi. Okay, again, you just take the same formula. We take the same formula over here and then look at the component with both mu and nu lower index. Okay, so let me here, okay, this formula over here. So mu and nu both lower index, but you take them both to be ij. Okay, so Tij is equal to Tgi, and then carry out this exactly the same manipulation to first order in perturbation, and you will find that sigma is symmetric. So then we have some perturbation. So let me write the perturbation again. So we had perturbations in terms of rho tilde. Okay, rho tilde is a perturbation, p tilde is a perturbation. Then you have qi is a perturbation. Okay, that came from the I0 component. And then we had also sigma ij. Okay, so these are the perturbations in T mu. So now we are going to decompose them into scalars, vectors, and tensors as before. Okay. So qi, for example, I can write as del I q tilde plus capital Qi with the condition that this is 0. Similarly, sigma ij, okay, sigma ij is traceless anyway. Okay. So that you have to impose because the trace part has gone into p tilde. But you can write this as the vector part plus the derivative part. Let me call this sigma tilde. Again, this plus for the tensor part. And with the understanding that this is divergenceless, okay, because that part has gone into this, and sigma, this one has as well as the tracelessness condition. So delta ij sigma trans sigma Tij equals 0. So this is what is called the transverse traceless component. So the scalar perturbations of T mu nu are P tilde, rho tilde, Q tilde, and sigma tilde. Is this clear? And these are the ones that are going to be important because the vector perturbation we have already seen that the initial condition sets the vector perturbation to 0. Okay, so it doesn't grow. Okay, because it's a linear differential equation, and if the initial condition is 0, then of course 0 remains the solution. Okay. We'll see later that this in fact is 0. Okay, for the kind of energy momentum tensor that you'll have. Okay. So tensor perturbation is also more or less trivial. It just satisfies the free Einstein's equation. Okay, so which basically means that tensor perturbation more or less remains constant. Okay. So the scalar perturbation is what you have to really analyze. Okay, because these will act as sources to the scalar perturbation of the metric. Okay, and you have to solve the appropriate differential equations involving the sources as well as the metric degrees of freedom. So in fact, if you recall, that metric fluctuations had 4 scalar modes. okay, which are called phi, psi, E and B. So you have 4 scalar modes from the metric perturbation and 4 scalars from energy momentum tensor. So 8 variables, okay, but not all these 8 variables are gauge invariant because you have 2 gauge transformations. So 2 gauge transformation. Okay, again I will look at the scalar mode. Okay. So we have the xi0, okay, that's a scalar gauge transformation, and then from the xi we can pick up this del I xi. Okay, that's also a scalar gauge transformation. Okay. So you have 8 variables and 2 gauge transformations. So you expect that you should be able to construct 6 independent gauge invariant objects. Okay, because by using these 2 gauge transformations, we should be able to fix 2 of these. Now we have already seen that out of the metric degrees of freedom, how to fix these gauge invariant objects. Okay, the purely metric degrees of freedom, and that we called this phi b and psi b. Okay, I'll write them down later. So the question now is how we pick up the gauge invariant combinations from these. Okay, and for that you have to now study the gauge transformation laws of these variables, p tilde, rho tilde, q tilde, and sigma tilde. Is this clear?
So could you please repeat why all they are scalar perturbation?
Why all they are?
Scalar perturbation of T mu.
Because these don't have any index, right?
Okay.
As you can see, because this is a vector perturbation, and it's pure vector because you have taken out the scalar degrees of freedom. Right? This is a tensor perturbation, but these don't carry any space index, right? And that's why you call them scalar perturbation.
Okay. Okay.
Any other question?
So these vector modes would have appeared, right, if we didn't have a phi scalar field but some sort of vector field during inflation?
Yeah, they could have appeared, indeed. But even then, one can argue that the vector perturbations get damped. Okay, maybe we will do that at some point. Okay, that if they are present during inflation, but then suppose they disappeared, then those perturbations get damped quickly. Okay, because the metric doesn't really have a dynamical vector degree of freedom. This is something we can try to discuss later. Okay, but yeah, so but you are right that if there are vector fields during inflation, they could have produced vector perturbation.
Okay.
The reason for damping would be similar to that of photons, right? Because any vector perturbation would evolve similar to how photons would evolve.
Yeah, so the photon, I mean, a vector perturbation inside the photon could have survived because the metric degree of freedom, metric doesn't have a vector perturbation. Right? Metric doesn't have dynamical vector.
The reason for damping is similar to, like,
scalar mode of the
damping would, the damping would go as 1 by lambda raised to 4 for vectors.
Yeah, so it will be like the damping of a scalar mode of the photon. Because photon doesn't have a physical scalar degree of freedom, right?
Yeah.
The point is, if you take a plane wave for the photon, right? If it's a vector mode, then in the absence of, if you are doing linear perturbation in the absence of source, for example, right, then that will just keep oscillating, right? It doesn't damp. But a scalar mode of the photon is not a physical mode. And that will damp out. This will be like a massive mode which will damp out exponentially.
So, you're saying the vector modes die exponentially?
Yeah, I think for the vector modes of the metric, as far as I remember, die exponentially. Even if you try to perturb it from the beginning, because it doesn't have propagating degree of freedom, right?
Yeah.
But let's first focus on the scalar modes. Okay, at this stage, you don't have to focus on the scalar mode because for the gauge transformations, we can do it in general. So gauge transformation in this case is like coordinate transformation. Okay, again, to first order we'll be working to first order. So x mu goes to y mu, which is x mu minus xi mu of xt. Okay? That's the way we have been defining our xi's. And you can also write this relation, the reverse relation, which will also will need. So x mu is y mu plus xi mu of yt. Okay? Of course, this is not exact, but first order in xi, this is true. Right? Because when you take the other side, right, inside the argument, you have to replace x by y, but that's order xi square. Okay, so the first order.
So
Yes, go ahead, please.
Could you go back in the previous slide?
Yes. Okay.
So we are not saying that these are independent, right? That p bar, rho bar, q bar, sigma bar are independent from these other two scalars, like effectively.
These scalars?
Like
Yeah,
we have
at this
8 scalars with 2 gauge transformations.
Yeah.
But the remaining 6, even after removing, like constructing gauge invariant scalars or something, like the remaining 6 are not all independent, right? In the sense that since the perturbations in T mu nu are perturbations of the form of the, like either of radiation or of standard model particles, they are all formed during reheating, which again comes from the phi field.
Yeah. So the point is that they are not independent in the sense that at the end, of course, they will not be independent. They will be determined all by the initial condition.
Yeah.
At the end of initiation, right? But when you set up the differential equation, you have to treat them as independent variables. And then you have to find the appropriate equations that can connect them.
Yeah, and those equations will come from some theory rather than from cosmology.
Well, they will come from Einstein's equation, for example, right? Einstein's equation will give you some, the equation of state will give you some, and then as you will see, we'll need a little more input, okay, other than these two.
Yeah, okay.
But it's true that they'll come from some theory that describes the background, the physics, the microscopic physics.
Yeah, and that also in the reheating part, like
Reheating and subsequent, right?
Yeah.
Matter and radiation dominated part.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all those will have to be taken into account.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Any other question? Okay. So let's look at these coordinate transformations. So under this, T mu nu of x goes to T rho sigma. This is just transforming it as a tensor. T rho sigma of y del y rho del x mu and then del x mu del y sigma. Okay, this is the standard tensor transformation law of a mixed tensor. So this, let's write this as T rho sigma of y is x minus xi. So x minus xi. This will be, okay, maybe I just expand this out. So this will be T rho sigma of x minus xi tau del tau of T rho sigma of x. Okay, I just substitute y equal to x minus I and expand it in Taylor series. This will be delta mu rho minus del mu xi rho. And this one will be delta sigma nu plus del sigma xi. Okay, that's from these relations over here. So now here, so what is the goal that will, so what you are trying to understand is that some of these deformations, some of these perturbations are just coordinate, the effect of coordinate change on the background. So if you start from a background T and then make a change of coordinate, it may look like it's producing a fluctuation in T. But of course, those fluctuations are just the effect of coordinate change, which you don't want to count. Those are gauge transformations. So here you are going to substitute for T the background T. So this we now substitute this as background T. So T equal to T bar in this formula. So T rho sigma of x is T bar rho sigma of x in this. So with this, let's see what we get. So now we are going to expand this out and keep terms to first order in xi. Okay, that's what we have done also for the metric perturbation. So you just keep terms to first order in psi. So which means basically that you have to pick two of these as a leading term and one of them as a subleading term, right? So let's first pick this, in which case you have to use this delta mu rho and delta sigma nu. So this term gives you minus xi tau del tau T bar mu nu. Then you have this term, okay, in which case the mu has to be, the rho has to be set equal to mu. Okay, and you pick this. So minus, sorry, when you pick this term, the sigma has to be set equal to nu. So T bar rho nu del mu xi rho. And when you pick this, then mu has to be set equal to rho. So plus T bar mu sigma del sigma psi. Is this clear? So now it's clear what you should do, right? We take this equation and then evaluate various components, right? So to figure out how the various fields, various modes transform. So let me write this again in the next slide and then we'll work out the individual components. So the change in T under a gauge transformation, okay, that's what we call delta tilde T tilde mu nu, is given by minus xi tau del tau of T bar mu nu. Sorry, I should have written another term here. That's the leading term. So leading term is when all of these are the, you pick up this, right? So that's just T bar mu nu. Okay, that's the background value. So that's what T mu nu becomes under this coordinate change. Okay. So here I'm writing there's a change, okay, the change from background. So it's this minus T bar rho nu del mu xi rho plus T bar mu sigma del sigma xi rho. So let's look at the 0, 0 component. So delta T tilde 0, 0. This is delta rho tilde, sorry, minus delta rho tilde, right? Because T tilde 0, 0 was minus rho tilde by definition. So this is given by, let's look at this. So you are picking mu and nu to be 0. So this is minus xi tau. Okay, so you see, if this is bar, okay, this derivative is acting on the background. The background doesn't depend on the space coordinates, right? It can only depend on the time coordinate. Okay. So this should write as xi 0 del t T bar 0, 0 minus here T bar nu is 0. Okay, so rho has to be 0 because background only has 0, 0 component. So rho has to be 0. And here mu is 0, so del 0 is I0. Del 0 is I0 plus T bar. Now mu is 0, so sigma has to be 0. Del 0, mu is 0, is I0. So these two cancel. And what you are left with, so this gives you T bar 0, 0 is minus rho bar. Remember? This is minus rho bar. So this tells us that delta rho tilde is minus xi 0 del T O bar. Okay, so this is the way the rho tilde transforms under a gauge transformation. Is this clear? So let's look at delta T tilde I0. Okay, I hope this is what I've defined as my QI. Okay, so delta T tilde I0 is, so I0, okay, so mu is I, nu is 0. Okay, so T bar I0 is 0. Okay, background has no mixed component, so this is 0. Then we have nu is 0. Okay, so rho has to be 0. So minus T bar 0, 0. Okay, and then here mu is I, right? Mu is I, del I. So this has to, rho has to be 0 and mu is I. Yeah, this is fine. Plus T bar, mu is I, so I. So once mu is I, sigma has to be K. Let me write it as K. Del K. Now nu is 0, so del K is I0. So this gives you T bar 0, 0 is rho bar. So this gives you rho bar. And T bar IK is P bar delta IK. So plus P bar. The delta IK converts this to del I is I0. Del I is I0. So this is QI by our definition. So that gives you delta QI is rho bar plus P bar. Del I is I0. Okay. And now let's look at the IJ component. Delta T tilde IJ. So this is given by, let me remind you, delta P tilde times delta IJ plus delta sigma IJ. So this, let's put I and J. So this is T bar IJ. Okay, here. So minus xi 0 del 0 T bar IJ. So that's P bar delta IJ minus, so nu is J, so rho better be K. So T bar K J. So mu is I, is IK plus T bar. This is mu is, mu is I. So this should be K del K. Something is wrong. Del K, mu is J, so it's Ij. So this one, okay, so this is P bar I, P bar times delta Ik, right? So this is P bar times del I is Ij. And this one is again P bar delta Kj. Okay. So K is set equal to 0. So this is equal to minus P bar del I is Ij again. So you see that these two terms cancel. Okay, so these two terms cancel. Okay. And you are left with this term. Okay. So let's now compare with this. Okay. We see from this that sigma ij doesn't transform because the whole transformation is proportional to delta ij, and that's captured purely by delta p tilde. Okay. So let me write this. So delta p tilde, we get delta p tilde as minus xi0 delta p tilde and delta sigma ij is 0. Is this clear? So I'm going to write this again in the next slide, but here you see the delta sigma ij equal to 0 means that sigma tij, sigma I and sigma tilde are all gauge invariant, right? Because those are the tensor vector and scalar components of sigma ij, so all of those are gauge invariant. So you only are left with the pressure perturbation, okay, from this part, and then of course Qi and the density perturbation from these two. Okay, so I'm going to write this in the next slide. So those are the ones with gauge transform. So delta rho tilde is minus xi0 del 0 rho bar del t rho bar. Delta p tilde is minus xi0 del t p bar. Delta qi is rho bar plus p bar del I is I0 and delta sigma is I0. Okay. Now delta qi, remember that we had introduced this as del I q tilde. So qi, let me write qi was del I q tilde plus qi. So this can be translated saying that delta q tilde is rho bar plus p bar times I naught. Right? Because rho bar and p bar doesn't depend on the space coordinates. So this is rho bar plus p bar times I naught. And delta qi is 0. So basically, this is saying that the tensor and the vector perturbations that are encoded in the energy momentum tensor are all gauge invariant. And the only ones which transform under gauge transformation are the scalar perturbations. Okay, so of which, and this delta sigma is equal to 0 means that delta sigma tilde is also equal to 0. Okay, later I'm just focusing on the scalar part now. So this implies that delta sigma tilde is 0. Okay, so let me put those inside boxes that are the important ones. So these two, and then this, and this. So the idea now is that you have to find gauge invariant combinations. And so for that, you have to remember the transformation of the metric degrees of freedom. So recall transformation of metric degrees of freedom. Metric scalar degree of freedom, right? which are phi, psi, E and P. So those were given by delta phi as minus del T xi naught, delta B as lambda inverse xi naught, lambda minus lambda del T xi, sorry, this is minus lambda del T xi. So xi is basically inside xi I. It's not necessary here, but xi I we had parameters as del I xi, right? That's the scalar part of the perturbation. And then there is a what I call the zeta I maybe. I don't remember what, yeah. Okay, this is the important one, lambda del T xi. Then delta E was E minus xi. And delta psi was psi plus H psi naught. So now the idea is that we are going to combine the variables from here and here to make gauge invariant combinations. Now there are two gauge invariant combinations that we had found just from the metric degrees of freedom. Those we call phi b and psi b, right? So phi b and psi b are gauge invariant. So let's just leave them aside. So the other combinations are what I'm going to write down. Okay, and it's easy to check. So minus zeta. Remember the last time we introduced this variable zeta and r, right, which was a negative of each other. And but nevertheless, we use two symbols, and that reason is going to become clear now. So we'll define minus zeta as psi plus h over del T of rho bar times rho tilde. Let's say this is gauge invariant. So psi transforms as, sorry, delta psi is not psi plus h, it is h psi naught. I think I made these also. This was the new E. Okay, but here it's just minus psi. It's a change in it. Okay. So delta psi is h psi naught. Okay, so if you multiply rho tilde, okay, so rho tilde is here. Okay. So if you multiply rho tilde by h by del T rho bar, you see that it transforms as minus h psi naught. So this is gauge invariant. Okay, and that's what we are going to call minus zeta. Maybe I should use a different pen too. I'll use blue box to write down the gauge invariant variables. Then we have the variable r. You see, we have delta p tilde as minus xi naught delta p bar, right? So you just basically do the same thing. Okay. So r is psi plus h over del T p bar. Okay. Now I'll not do that. I'll try to combine with q tilde because this I'm going to use for something else. Okay. The definition of r will be psi minus h over rho bar plus p bar times q tilde. You see, q tilde transforms as rho bar per p bar times I naught. So if you take h over rho bar plus p bar, okay, it just becomes H xi naught, and that cancels off this. The third one, I'm going to make a combination of rho tilde and p tilde from here. So that's, we'll call P, which is p tilde minus del T p bar over del T rho bar times rho tilde. It's just a question of what linear combination you take to be independent, and I'm just defining these. And the fourth one is sigma tilde itself, because sigma tilde doesn't transform. The fourth one is sigma tilde. And from the metric degree of freedom, we got these two, right? That we had gotten even earlier. So you see that indeed we have 6 variables, 6 gauge invariant variables, 2 from here, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 from here. So these are the 6 gauge invariant variables that we have. And now you see that there are these two things, R and zeta, they are independent, okay, at least a priori. But we'll see that during the inflationary phase, right, at the end of inflation, they are actually the same. Okay, both of them become equal, and they become equal to what we had called R at the end of inflation. Okay, that combination. It doesn't look like this because these are all provided by the scalar field theory, right? Here you are talking in general. But once you restrict yourself to scalar field theory, okay, look at the corresponding energy momentum tensor, then you can check that this R and zeta definition agrees with what we had earlier. Okay, but this is something we'll check later. Okay, other questions? So let me just review where we stand. Okay. So you have 6 variables. You have 6 variables, which are phi b, psi b, R, zeta, and then PE and sigma tilde. Now, how many equations? These are scalar variables. Okay, because as I said, this is the non-trivial part of the evolution. So 6 scalar variables. Okay. So let's look at Einstein's equation. And let's write this as k mu nu equal to 0, where k mu nu is R mu nu minus half R g mu nu minus 8 pi g t mu nu. And let's try to see how many equations does it have. How many scalar equations does it give? How many scalar equations? So for this, we have to also decompose the equations of motion into the scalar vector tensor part. And let's just focus on the scalar part. So K00 is a scalar, right? So K00 equal to 0 gives you one equation. Ki0 can be decomposed into a scalar and a vector. So Ki0, if I write as del I of K plus, let's call it Li, okay, with del I Li equal to 0. So this K equal to 0 will give you one scalar equation. So this is scalar. And Kij, again, I can decompose as delta Ijm plus say del I del J P. These are scalars. And then you have say del I Uj plus del J Uy plus V trans. Right? These satisfy the usual transverse conditions. Del I Uy equal to 0, and then del I Pt equal to 0, and Ptii equal to 0. Anyway, so the point is that by looking at Einstein's equation, okay, and focusing on the scalar component, we can get 4 equations, right? K00, K, M and P. So this gives you 4 scalar equations. M equal to 0, P equal to 0. So you see that we somehow are missing 2 equations because you have 6 variables and you have 4 linear differential equations. So we certainly don't have enough equations to solve for them. And this one, of course, we have encountered before, right? And even while evaluating the background, right, we had more equations than unknowns, and you have to put some supplementary information, right? And that information came through equation of state, which in turn can be thought of as some form of the energy momentum. So the equation of state will provide one equation. Okay, so this I'll discuss again next time in detail. So equation of state gives you one equation. Okay, so that's the relation between P and rho, right? P equal to F of rho, and we'll translate it to the fluctuations. But we need one more. So the other equation, but the other equation is needed before we even talk about the equation of state. The other equation that we'll be using is what is called, that we'll assume, perfect fluid form of T mu. So what is a perfect fluid form? Okay, so let me write that down and then maybe I'll stop. So you'll assume that T mu nu has this general form P times G mu nu plus P plus rho U mu u nu for some choice of P rho and U mu, but U mu satisfies this condition, the G mu nu, U mu u nu equal to -1. Okay. Physically, what this means that in the choice of inertial frame, of local inertial frame, in which U has the structure of 1, 0, 0, 0, we have T00 equal to rho, Pij equal to P delta ij, and T0i equal to 0. Okay. So let me just explain what this means and then I'll stop. So we know that given any coordinate system, right, you can choose a local inertial frame. Okay, in the local inertial frame, what's going to happen is that the metric is going to become delta eta mu nu, and the first derivative of the metric will vanish. But that choice is not unique because you can make a Lorentz transformation of that frame, and that's still a local inertial frame. But now you say that you will fix that local inertial frame by requiring that the U mu is 0. That U mu has this structure, which means that the U mu behaves like it's a time-like vector, but it has only first component non-zero, rest are 0. And in that frame, the energy momentum tensor takes this form. Okay, that's the form of a fluid. Okay, perfect fluid, the energy density and pressure. So from this viewpoint, you can interpret this energy momentum tensor as due to a fluid of something, and you can think of the u mu as being local force velocity of the fluid. So this is a form we will assume, and we will see that once you assume this form, that reduces 1 degree of freedom of 1 scalar degree of freedom of t. And in fact, we'll also see that it sets the sigma ij equal to 0 completely. The tensor degrees of freedom just go away. And we will assume that that's true for the kind of energy momentum tensor that you have to deal with. And with that, you will be able to get the right number of equations and right number of variables, right? 4 equations in 4 variables, which you can now solve. And the justification of this basically is that the kind of energy momentum tensor that normally comes in cosmology all satisfy this. Okay, for example, the matter-dominated universe. Okay, if you have a if the energy momentum tensor is provided by some particles moving in the universe, okay, or some radiation that fills the universe, okay, then it has this form. And in fact, even for the scalar field fluctuation, if the energy momentum tensor is coming from a scalar field with potential, then also you can show that it has this form. So this form is quite general, but of course it's not the most general one. But we will assume that during the course of the evolution of the universe, the energy momentum tensor had always been like this. Okay, and with that we will be able to evolve it forward. Okay, so I think I'll stop here. Are there questions?
Sir, isn't in this inertial frame, it is locally looking like T mu nu is isotropic and homogeneous?
Yes, indeed. Well, homogeneous, you cannot really say because it's local, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's, so isotropic.
Isotropic, exactly.
But why? But we are saying this for the perturbation.
Yes, for the perturbation, exactly.
Isn't there some sort of an incompatibility there? Like,
but the point is the perturbation of the I mean, if you take a matter particles, for example, imagine the perturbation, the source is a set of matter particles moving at random, right? Not isotropically. You can show that there is an appropriate choice of u in which it will look isotropic locally.
I mean, so that is not the co-moving frame.
It is roughly the co-moving frame, yes. Right? Because for matter, for example, in the co-moving frame, no, it's not a co-moving frame. Sorry, it's not a co-moving frame. It's local inertial frame. Certainly. Yeah, co-moving frame is defined everywhere at one go, right? You are certainly not claiming that we can define a frame everywhere in which this is true. That there is a coordinate system in which this is true everywhere. Right? For every point in space-time, you can make a change of coordinates where this is true. That's what it's saying.
Yeah, okay.
So once you bring the metric to the form where g mu nu is eta mu nu, right? And furthermore you bring u mu to this standard form, right? Then it's saying that this is like this. So what I'm saying is that this is this doesn't tell us that we are assuming homogeneity and isotropy of the universe, right? Because if you have a radiation filling the universe, right? But radiation doesn't have to be homogeneous and isotropic, right? Any radiation that is a gas of photons, okay, which are moving in various places. In some region, the photon may be over dense. In some region, the photon may be less dense. Nevertheless, you can show that the energy momentum tensor takes this form, right? And similarly for the scalar field, right? If you have a scalar field, right, don't assume homogeneity and isotropy, right? You can just work this out. For the scalar field, the energy momentum tensor is known. So take a scalar field arbitrary potential, look at the energy momentum tensor, and you can convince yourself that the energy momentum tensor can actually be brought into this form for the appropriate choice of u. Is that point clear?
Yeah.
So this is not assuming homogeneity and isotropy. Any other question? Okay, so if not, we'll stop and then we'll continue.
Something from field theory.
Okay, so let me just do one thing. Let me Please stop sharing and then stop recording.